Hello, welcome back to the Vitality Brotherhood, where we help men restore their vitality so they can continue to chase excellence. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Scott Ford. Mr. Scott Ford is in the financial advisor space. And the reason I wanted to have Scott on is because he has such a wide variety of life experiences and hobbies. He's done a lot of deep work on himself. The reason I know that is because I worked with Scott, with Dr. Stillman in one of our programs. So Scott and I have spent a lot of time talking, and we both have gone through a lot of similar things. And so I thought it would be fun to have him on. Scott, how are you doing today? It's great to have you here.
Yeah, man, doing good here, Jim. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and yeah, happy to share whatever's useful. But at the end
Sure.
of the day, we'll have a conversation and see
Absolutely.
where it goes.
So you're in the wealth management business, and West Virginia doesn't really come to like when you think about West Virginia, you can think about coal mines, you think about hillbillies, you think about moonshine. You don't really think about wealth management. So how did you get into that? Like, first of all, have you always lived in West Virginia? Like, what was your childhood like? And then how did you get into the wealth management space?
It's funny when I hear all those, questions slash comments. And so, no, haven't always lived here, but when I think hillbilly, wealth management, backwoods. You're describing me, man. This is kind of fun. So, no, I was actually I was actually born Tennessee, raised young in Kentucky, moved to actually the West Virginia area, Martinsburg, real close to where I live now, then
Mhm.
landed in Hagerstown and spent a lot of my life there, Hagerstown, Maryland. And now back to West Virginia on a property that restored into a permaculture regenerative, as you know, farm
That's awesome.
basically or landscape. So yeah, we're in West Virginia, and I guess for most wealth management in West Virginia doesn't always go hand in hand, though they both start with a W. Maybe that's the only thing they have in common.
The neat thing about the wealth management space, that I find is there's a lot of similarities to like the fitness, health, and wellness industry. Because a lot of what I do is basically pretty much what you do, is getting people to adhere to some basic fundamental principles that most people don't do. Most people start chasing really fancy things before they really need to. Could you talk about, your podcast, the company you created, your vision for that, and how um, you wanted to just help? Like with me, like what I do is like helping people basically get out of their own way. Most of the people that have gotten themselves in a bad place um, just have some bad habits that they just can't kick, and they need a little TLC to get them going in the right direction.
Yeah, the what comes to me there, Jim, is I'm gonna dive deep and then I'm gonna come back up quick, right? So what comes to me immediately is the idea of Austrian economics.
Hmm.
And, we're in the States here where I'm at in West Virginia. And so what's practiced here is Keynesian economics. So just quickly, overview there is why the Austrian school, and by the way, this is after reading God knows how many books, but at least 80 on Austrian economics and various thoughts down that line that really resonate with me. And the reason is it's more focused on natural uh, law or the natural economy and sound money, right? It should balance out, right? And it should be backed by something. Where the Keynesian view is more, let's flood things and then it's going to benefit, right? And so I guess what I would give the analogy because of your world is maybe in fitness and in health, the health space, it would be like, okay, we want to optimize, lose body fat and, maintain muscle, but also have good biomarkers, et cetera. Well, one option would be to inject a mega dose of anabolic steroids. And in doing that, you're going to lower body fat and increase muscle. Long term, what's the effect of that and what's that going to do to your biomarkers? Or we can say, oh, there is a challenge here. And I'm not saying that various hormone replacements aren't a play. What I'm
Sure.
saying is, let's think long term. And
Hmm.
then in
Yep.
doing that, Is that going to sustain us long term? Is that going to optimize our biomarkers? And so my point in all of that dialogue, Jim, is the Austrian school is let things play out. Like nature has a way of leveling things out. Life does too, and our health does as well. And so where Keynesian may be like, let's flood with mega steroids, that probably doesn't end well. The Austrian view is, well, let's play this out a little bit and more of the natural law of order of things. And so that's one. The second thing I would say, Jim, is what we do and focus on, which is what led me to leaning towards the Austrian School of Economics, is simplicity. None of this shit needs to be that complicated. And
Yeah,
actually, I think the more you know and understand, the more simplistic you can make things. And that's what we do with wealth is how do we simplify this to the ultimate essence of what we're saying and what needs to be done? And that's what we like to bring to the table.
that's awesome. Talk about a lot of your hobby, like so you've been an entrepreneur, you've got all these things going on. Talk about like what does your life look like as far as workload? And now I know you've worked with a lot of really smart people. You've done a lot of seminars, you have a lot of great hobbies. Um, Talk about like this. I don't think people talk enough about the seasons in life, and it's very similar to your business. There's seasons in investment, right? There's a time to be a little more aggressive. There's like take high risk things because you have more time. And then there's a time where you need to like invest in things that are a little safer, I guess you would say, right? Um, what season are you in, and how has it been for you working through these seasons?
That's a big question, Jim, because a lot of thoughts come up for me. All right, so I'm gonna attempt to answer it, and then I'm gonna give you some of the thoughts if useful. And the attempt in answering that is uh, it, into summer for me. What do I mean? Well, I've had a strong, spring and a really strong summer when it comes to my life and business. There's a lot of things I could share that some would call success. That's great. And now I'm in this, I don't know, it's leaning towards more of, I'm not going to use the word wise, although the white would think would ideally you come with wisdom, but nonetheless,
Thanks for the
um,
compliment.
I'm just saying, um, the elder space at a minimum, right? To be in that, that's where I feel like I'm at is the space of I have a big idea of the future when it comes to making the world better and living fully. And that's really the ultimate goal for me is how can I live and love fully at this next chapter, right? Instead of at times I could get caught up in work or other various things that not a good or bad judgment, just you can get caught up in it. And really, it's like at this stage where how can I live and love most fully that's going to have the greatest impact, me, family, and, the world? What is that? And that's my focus, right? That's where I'm at. And then share hopefully some of the wisdom or at least some of the mistakes I've made.
Mhm.
Yeah, with those that are coming up next. Then when I get maybe a more philosophical thought of that, I think of, here we are, it's what, 2025 already, is I think some of the work of Brian Johnson as an example. And I'm sure you know of that name. And why do I bring it up? Well, he talks about don't die and let's live forever. I don't know, man. I just think that you talk about the seasons in life, and I think there are seasons. I know there's seasons in life, and I know there's seasons in the economy. And in some ways, I think there's benefit in that, right? It was designed that way. And if can we optimize and maximize the life we have? Awesome. Where we can live and love more fully. And I don't know, because I love and am fascinated with some of Brian's thought experiments and what he's doing, right? So I don't want to throw shade on this guy because I really like what he's up to in many ways. Um, And is there benefit to having seasons to recognize that the death brings new life? And that is actually part of a normal cyclical nature. And that
Sure.
seems to make sense to me. So that's my thought of the um, bigger picture of spring, summer, fall, and winter.
I think a lot of people, particularly in the West, here in Nicaragua, people seem to accept the aging process. Elders are kind of um,
Hmm.
admired, like in Asian culture, like in Native American culture. I know you're big into Native American culture. Why do you think that is that in the West we particularly just tend to write people off that are old? We don't really um, embrace the aging process and the wisdom that comes from that. And how has your mindset changed in the last, say, 10 years compared to what you were doing 10 years ago compared to what you're doing now?
Um, well, for sure in our culture, w- w- and we all can get caught up in this, including me. I mean, look, you kind of mentioned this when we first kicked things off, right? You mentioned something about the color of your beard and what the barber may recommend doing. And I'm not
Yes,
saying what you should or should do, right? I have
right.
plenty of white here going on, which should equate to wisdom, but we worship youth.
Mhm.
it, I don't even, and then the question was why? Because to your point, right, other cultures don't necessarily worship, yet they really appreciate elders and those life experiences and that wisdom that ideally elders have that can be shared. And I don't know the best answer to that, Jim. I guess to some degree it's um we get caught up in materialism. And so I guess youthful looks and muscles and those things um, are have a natural resonance and people are drawn toward and again kind of worshiped here,
Mhm.
where the aging process, which is natural and has its own benefit, aren't. Gosh, and this could go deep because then is this what leads to nursing homes? And this is what leads to, right? We kind of, they're almost set aside. Oh, well, let's just set that. Oh, where others that's appreciated. They want to take care of them and they want to gain and garner that wisdom. And um, yeah, I don't know the complete route, man. I'm kind of uh, navigating this water with you a little bit. I just know it's real. And to your point, various indigenous wisdoms and cultures really revered that wisdom. I mean, who were, um, the medicine men? Who were the elders that, when a big decision was made, to gather around that council? I do know indigenous wisdom for Native Americans were 7 generations in thinking. So if a decision was going to be made that was big, the elders would be like, how's this going to affect 7 generations from now? Not just us in a vain
Right.
way today, but let's look 7 generations from the water, the soil, the food, right? We're all relatives, we're all related. How's that going to affect and have an impact? And so, yeah, I just know it's different. Why is a big question. We could probably take the rest of the day and kind of dig into that around a fire as they would do to try to get to the best answer. I don't have it. I just know it is different. And I think hopefully it's shifting where we can appreciate the seasons. We can appreciate the benefits of being around and having a lot of life experience that you can share with others. Um, and respect that more because I think it helps the next generation and generations to come in doing that.
I think a lot of it comes from one, us separating ourselves from nature. Because when
Mm,
you live on a farm or you're hunting for your livelihood, you see the circle of life. You see life and death. You understand you're mortal. But now, very few people actually see people die on a regular basis. They
mm,
don't see animals die. They aren't part of the process. And then also, we've pretty much tried to eliminate any kind of spirituality. It's basically we're just here to consume as much as possible and get out with as much, pleasure and fun as possible. That's kind of the, what's pushed. And I think that really just, if you can't consume and go out and have fun, then what good is it to even exist? And a lot of it, I think, is from the Western model of government healthcare, so to speak, because the government then looks at you as like a decimal place on a spreadsheet. Well, these people are too expensive. They're not providing enough back into the economy, so let's kind of throw them off to that's just kind of my thoughts on all of it. But you know, it's definitely a problem because the youth don't have anyone to really kind of help them along, so to speak. And then the youth, even if the people want to help them along, most of the youth don't even want to, they don't even want to care, you know. And then you've got things like, it's going to be interesting because you've got AI, all this instant gratification. All of a sudden, you can be an expert on anything by going to Chat GPT, and you don't have to do a 5, 6 year internship. You don't have to, you know, shovel all the shit to grow the flowers. You can just go to Chat GPT and it'll give you whatever answers you want. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next, you know, 5 to 10 years.
Agreed, Jim, totally. And you sparked some things in me with a few of the comments. And one was, all right, let me try to frame this a little bit, right? Because again, there's this um, backwoods wealth management guy in West Virginia. So it, framing it in wealth management. Well, the word wealth, the Anglo-Saxon word wealth, is the word wheel, W-E-A-L. The definition of wheel, Anglo-Saxon, is well-being. So I've actually worked with billionaires who are freaking miserable and their families jacked up. So they have all kinds of monetary money. They have a lot of well-being. And then you can look at indigenous cultures and see some of the happiest people in the world.
Mhm.
They have well-being. That's wealth. So I've lived both, man. So, you know, and in doing this, you witness and you're like, yeah, wow, you have a lot of money, but you have a ton of well-being. Like, what's going on here? And I think part of what's happened is we've left some of these traditions and ancient cultures where, look, we've grown and we have technology and we have these various things, and we've dumped the baby out with the bathwater, right? Meaning, can we evolve and grow these traditions and culture? Yes. I'm not saying don't embrace AI and technology with its benefits. Just know, as all in life, there's a shadow side, right? There's a darker side. Know that. And let's take some of the wisdom that our ancestors learned with us. All right, so I can only give you personal experience because the rest is just theory. You can read a lot of shit in books, and that's great. It has some use. But what do you do with it? Well, it's experience. So for me, part of buying 145 acres and turning it into a regenerative landscape is to be in contact with nature because I think it has a lot to teach us, right? And so I could share at some point if useful, what did that look like? Well, it's we did it in 2013, so we're 11 years in, but it's a lot's happened and I've learned a lot. What you made me think of was hunting. So I've, as an adult, my parents didn't raise me this way. It's something I was drawn to. I'm like, if I'm going to consume meat, I want to be involved in that process. So this goes back a
Absolutely.
long time ago. And so bow hunting specifically. Why? Well, again, because it's more intimate, you're connected, and you know, Rogan and others have gotten into it, and that's really cool. And been doing it a long time. I started in my early 20s and I'm, you know, in my 50s now, so 30 some years. And that's evolved to a point. I'll give you an example this year. I killed a doe, and I've killed some big bucks, and there's reasons to do that. Why to kill a more mature animal, right? And we could talk about that, but there's reasons for the animal's benefit to do it. To me, what's happened is when I was younger, I would kill it. It's part of our food, do all the things, take it to somewhere to get processed. That's all changed for me. Now it's, yes, I kill it. It's part of the process, and it's actually the least fulfilling and hardest part of the process. Then once I kill it, I give thanks to Creator for this life that I'm going to now consume and it's going to be part of me. And at this point, I will typically, you know, become emotional because there's something that was alive that's now dead because of me. And I'll put my hands on it and then I process every piece of that animal. I take its guts out. I put it in a cooler. I then take its hide, I process it to butcher it. So my hands are on every piece of that animal, and I want to use it all the way down to the bones, which then can go to a friend who has chickens to pick it. Then we burn it. It goes to minerals back into the earth. Why? Why have capital where I could exchange that capital to have someone else do it? But there's two problems with that. One is they're not going to take care of it the way I would. So you're going to get stuff back that you're going to consume that's going to have bones in it and various things that you may or may not want in your meat. Two, I want to honor the animal. Like I took the life, I want my hands on every piece of that process. And I don't know, Jim, there's something spiritual about that practice. Like the meat tastes different. I think it enters you different. It becomes part of you. And I think, again, ancient wisdom and indigenous cultures understood this. And these are some of the practices that we have left out because of capitalism. And I'm a capitalist, so I don't want to minimize that. There's a balance in all this, and materialism of, yeah, well, economically, you should, would it make more sense economically for me to send this to a processor and butcher to take care of? Hell yes, of course. But it doesn't make sense spiritually. And I think these are some of the things we left out when it comes to growth and what we call capitalism and wealth, that actually benefits us, which we are nature, and is more sustainable and has a deeper connection and meaning and just wealth, which is well-being.
I think what our modernization of all this stuff does is it really turns humans into a god with a small g.
Hmm.
Because when you're out having to hunt for your food, and I've spent a ton of time with indigenous cultures in the high Arctic, um, these people are really one with the environment, and they appreciate the fact that it's a gift for them to be here. When you remove yourself from that and you live in this very sterilized modern world, and granted, even though I live in a third world country, I'm still living a very modern world. I'm sitting here talking to you on Zoom. It almost turns humans into like a god with a small g complex where we have a lot more power than we think we do. And I think it kind of goes to your head when you start thinking, well, I'm just going to out hack God and I'm just going to live to be 150 by taking the right combination of XYZ. You could get hit by a bus walking outside your house tomorrow. Or I mean, I live next to two of the most active volcanoes in the world. You could come out one morning and boom, you're not in control. And I think humans get in a lot of trouble when they think that they can control everything instead of
Hmm.
being part of the environment. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on because you are a deep thinker and you think a lot about these things. Let's talk about what are two or three things, little pitfalls that you may have gotten yourself in trouble with during your career, and um, how did they mold and shape who you are today? If you could just think of a couple things that kind of setbacks for you that were great learning experiences.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we all have our path, right? And I don't know how much I would change in my path, though it's had its challenges.
Mhm.
So one of mine most recently that's become really clear, Jim, is this thing of being a business owner and entrepreneur, right? And you mentioned that about me, and it's true. So I started in middle school doing magic. So I've always been curious, and when I get into something, I get into it. So I got into magic, and then I started doing birthday parties and like going to restaurants and doing table magic and making money as a kid. Making money by adding value, albeit, and that's what being an entrepreneur is, taking things from one level to another of more productive, and then you get compensated for that. So the question, though, the deeper question for me became why? Why did I take that path? Why did I end up with, a company in Maryland, Tennessee, Atlanta, and then, by the way, we set up another company called Legato Family where we create family constitutions, which is how do we create values, traditions, symbols, rites of passage which is another thing from ancient and indigenous cultures that they had. They had rites of passage for boys and girls to understand their place in the world. We've lost that. So anyway, we have a company that helps with that. Well, why did you have these four different things? Well, the deeper reflection and understanding became because I was running from something,
Mm.
right? And I kind of in some ways knew, right? So driven to work out, driven to eat right, driven to get 10,000 steps in, driven to have companies. And none of these things are good or bad, just what it is. I think the question becomes why. And when
Mm.
I sat with that and did some deep work in that, what became, oh, you got some wounds. So when I look at that, I go, oh, okay. Well, then let's face them. Let's dig into what you're running from. And so that's what I've been doing for, years, and that's some of the deeper work. The point of it is for me now, this next chapter can be, and this is some of what I learned, which I think is your question, what's been some of your path and what have you learned from it, is I think some of these entrepreneurs are running from something. They're creating these companies in some ways out of control. Like, I got to do this because I can't work for anyone. I'm unemployable, so I'm going to do this. And they have a lot of skills and things and gifts they can bring to the world. And they could be even more effective if they did it from a place of, and I heard this from Dan Sullivan, but I'm taking it to a different thought process. And Dan Sullivan has Strategic Coach, a coaching program for entrepreneurs. And that is, instead of running from something, can you run to it? So
Mm.
he coined that term, but to me at a deeper level is, well, what's that actually? Why are you running from?
Mm.
And if you can do that work and then running to something has a deeper meaning. So example, we all have this technology, which by the way is amazing and terrifying. All right, here's my theory of why. Came from an entrepreneur, one of the brightest entrepreneurs of our time, Steve Jobs. And Steve did a lot of work. Steve did actually, in his case, plant medicines. He did meditation. He gave out, I think, Autobiography of a Yogi was one of his all-time favorite books. And apparently, I think it's more than apparently, he sucked in relationships. Like, he was brutal. Well, what's missing there? I so in other words, you're connecting to spirit and you're getting this and these great downloads from creator and how you can make things different in the world. Yet what may be missing is natural instinct in nature in relationship. So this is where I think connection to spirit, technology, and making things better is awesome, is good, but it has its shadow. We can have the good and minimize the shadow, I think, if we connect with nature, our instinct, our natural who we are, and recognize from indigenous wisdom and culture, we are all one. So, in other
Mm.
words, they recognize we're all our relatives. Where they're talking about the plant family, the animal family, they're talking about, hey, I didn't create all this, something bigger than me did. Know that I'm connected. So, if this can be created
Mm.
and recognize we're all connected, I think it minimizes the shadow and thus limits the dark side of this.
Yeah.
So that's what I've learned. That the big thing has been as an entrepreneur, what was I running from? I have seen it, I have faced it, I've went into the dragon and looked it eye to eye and have done that work and continue to integrate that for healing and good for me, which then thus creates healing and good for all. It's like the I healing creates the we healing, which creates the all.
It all comes down to trade-offs, doesn't it? Everything has a plus and a minus. And a lot of times people that are ultra successful have to be unbalanced. And then it's a matter of just keeping it balanced enough to keep it on the track. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's this isn't about perfection. This is about figuring out what you need to do to keep the wheels on the road. And a lot of people don't want to admit that. And a lot of people, including myself, and we've had a lot of deep conversations about this, they're just running from, they just need noise because they can't handle silence. And that is something that our modern world does a wonderful job at, of creating all these distractions and noise. So that really in silence, I think silence is kind of God's way or nature's way of resetting your hard drive. And most people just don't want to do that hard reboot. They'd rather just keep rolling instead of shutting it down, shutting it off, and rebooting. And I've always enjoyed interacting with you because you always are thinking about looking at yourself, as opposed to most people, when they get into a bad place, they start looking everywhere else instead of turning it in on themselves.
Mm. It, isn't that like where the growth is for us, right? And so, and you
Yes.
had mentioned, Jim, as far as balance, I look at nature again, which is one of our best teachers, because people are like, balance is bullshit. Well, they're right, but they're not. And this is what I mean.
Right.
Because you're never in balance. True. So they say it's integration. Well, I push back on that. And I'll even give an example because I think of Tony Robbins, which, by the way, has been one of my mentors. When I was 19, like that dude changed my life. So no shade on Tony. Good guy. Amazing. That said, he's one of the ones that says balance is bullshit. It's about integration, right? Well, the challenge that I have with that is one of the greatest addictions in our country is workaholism. And if you stick with balance is bullshit, it's all integration, let's just bring my family into this, it's an easy way to justify your workaholism. I'm not saying is or isn't. I'm just saying for me, that's been true. So if I looked at nature, nature's never in balance and always seeking it.
Yeah.
Thus the fires, thus the storms, all of these things, that's out of balance. But it's because it's coming back. So it's always seeking balance and coming back. And I think that's useful for us. We're never going to be, you said it, we're not perfect. It's progress, not perfection. So recognizing, oh, I'm pushing the gas too hard, let's bring it back in. But then if we just lay on the couch all day, every day for a month, oof, okay, I'm a little, so it's always just coming back to homeostasis and balance. And I think nature is a great teacher um, for us in doing that.
Well, look at a bear, the bear in Alaska. They literally gorge themselves all summer to eat enough and get fat enough to survive the wintertime.
Mm,
And they hibernate the entire winter, and that cures their diabetes essentially.
I'm
So they go
smiling, man.
they
Yeah.
go from one extreme to the other extreme.
Mm.
There's no balance, but it keeps them on the road, right? If they don't get fat enough during the winter, the summertime, they die in the winter. And then if they don't have the winter, you know, they just keep gorging, which is basically what we've done to ourselves, is we've put ourselves in a continuous season of excess. But the problem is that there is excess, but it's empty excess. There's no nutrition in the food. So you're just basically tricking yourself into eating more and more and more. And obviously, that's a totally different topic. But I think when people get older, they start getting 40, they start getting 50, they start thinking like, I can just get away with all the shit I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. And you can still be very effective and you can still work hard. You just have to be smarter and more strategic about it. Um, can you talk about some of the things you've learned in your ability to be more strategic now in how you choose to spend your energy and capital, and not physical, not money capital, but your emotional resources, your energy, so to speak.
100%. And I was smiling because you were talking about bear. So that's kind of been my medicine. This is I just put this on today. It's bear
Oh, nice.
claw. It was made for me by a friend who's a bushcraft guy in West Virginia
Uh-huh.
that teaches bushcraft, which is basically how to live off the land and
Sure.
such and more than that. And he literally shared and taught me some indigenous wisdom. How do you respect an animal and actually smudge it once you kill it, which is, sending its spirit off. And there's a whole, anyway, it's ironic you brought the bear up because I literally put this on today when I saw it in my closet. Haven't worn it in years. Yeah. So, hmm, um, or frame the question again, Jim, because I lost a little track when I was sharing my bear gift.
Most men our age,
Hmm.
they've been pushing really hard, and maybe they've started taking TRT, maybe they've started taking peptides to kind of keep the ball rolling, so to speak. They have a hard time accepting the fact they have to be a little more strategic with their energy choices and what they put their effort into. I'm not saying that you need to fade away and become some old, guy that doesn't do anything. It's just as you get older, you just have to be smarter about your recovery. You have to be smarter about your sleep, and you have to be smarter about
Hmm.
your workload. What have you done? I know you realize this because we've talked about it for hours. Um, what have you done strategically for you to basically do those things, make better choices, and spend your emotional and regenerative capital more wisely?
Yes, thank you for that reframe. Um, here's, and I can again only speak from experience, so it's what I'm going to do because the
Mhm.
rest can be theory and may or may not be useful. And plus, how do I even know it's right or real? Well, experience. So for me, it's back to the idea of running from versus running to. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that in this instance, right, we have a X amount of resources and energy, and as we age, that changes. So where do you spend it? My answer is, and this is where I've been, focusing on being authentically me. And this is deep, by the way. It's
Yeah.
one thing to hear that. It's another thing. What's that actually mean?
Mhm.
Well, let me tell you what it doesn't mean. If you're running from something, you're going to attract things and people into your life that you're running from. It's just because we're here on this journey, and part of the journey is to heal, and it's like our subconscious is bringing things into us to be able to heal. And until we do, it's just going to keep bringing these things in: relationships, work environments, projects, all these things. And so part of that ends up being running from something, and we're not being ourself, like tiptoeing, whatever it is. So to me, and by the way, that uses up so much freaking energy. And we don't even know we're doing it, but it's
Yeah.
like we have the mask on. So we're masquerading around, don't even know we're doing it. And our real self's like, this is boy, that's not even what? So this inter conflict of running from something's burning so much energy. So I think people can take the foot off the gas, do breath work, do things they should to try to, as Paul Chek says, bring energy in, working in versus working out. Yes. And he would agree, I think, with what I'm saying here. I've learned some from him on this very thing of what's going on right internally. What's the root of causing this? And I
Right.
think it's not being completely authentic. And by the way, it's scary. I think it was Carl Jung that talked about it's either it's easier to become enlightened than to become whole. And what we're here to do is to become whole. Well, what's that mean? It's the idea of being fully you, who you're meant to be, which can scare the hell out of some people. And then you can get attacked by friends and relatives like, what are you doing? That's not you, when it really is. So I'm saying that, Jim, because that's what I've learned. And like this year, more than any other year, it's be fully who I was put here to be. Right. And in doing that, that's the individual healing, which will help the we and help the all healing. But to me, not doing that expends so I don't care what your workouts are. I don't care how much time you spend in nature. I don't care how much sleep you're getting. All important things. If you're not being fully you, you are spending energy and you have a hole you're never going to dig out of completely. think being fully you, as scary as that may be, and as hard as that may even be to figure out what that looks like, now gives a solid foundation for the sleep, the nature, the working in exercises, the working out exercises to actually have something to sit on versus you're bleeding out otherwise.
That's the interesting thing is in order to learn the real you, you have to slow down enough to actually learn. Like you can't learn when you're running. Like you don't learn new skills when you're exhausted and when you're tired. And as we get older, the car needs more maintenance. And in order to fix a car with high mileage, you actually have to pull it in the shop and put it up on the lift. You can't be changing the oil while you're driving it down the highway. You know, when the car's brand new, you can ignore the maintenance for a long period of time. But once it gets a little older, you've got to actually pull it to the shop and do the work. And most people just being still and silent is so uncomfortable, they just can't do it.
Mm.
Could you talk about some of the things that you had to do to learn how to be still and be silent?
It's such a good question because I mean I was headed there as you were sharing because it's like, well, how do we know who we really are? Well, it's being still and silent and quiet, which is hard to do for some, especially business owners and entrepreneurs. Me, um, yeah. Maybe I'll frame this in case useful. So this appeared to me early on, like in the early 2000s, right? Let's just call it 2005-ish time frame. Um, I was speaking, actually teaching at a local university, finances and wealth management. And I can remember heart rate being up, feeling flushed, feeling a little like, what's going on here? Like, am I going to pass out? Like, what is this? So, had a nurse who one of the team members that worked for me's wife was a nurse. So she's like, check your blood pressure. Well, of course it's up, right? Because I'm like in this mini not good spot. Um, Go to the doctor and they're like, oh, yeah, it looks like your blood pressure's up. Well, of course it was up. And here's these blood pressure medication and pills. And I'm like, oh, so I took them. I didn't take them. I got the prescription. I'm like, it didn't feel right to me. I'm like, I will if this is needed and I'll take it. And I'm young and I'm like, so I'm like, what can I do? And by the way, I was raised in a very religious household, right? So I had that as part of my imprinting. And again, no good or bad, just where I was at. So meditation and all that type of spirituality was a bit too woo for me, which may sound shocking hearing me today, but it was back then. So I was doing research and some of it resonated, some of it didn't. But then I came across a book called The Relaxation Response by Dr. Herbert Benson, who was a Harvard medical doctor. Oh, so there was no woo, it was pure science. And it was so simple, which has been a theme of my life. He was like, sit down, 5 minutes. Start with 2 minutes and breathe in, shut your eyes and sit. You don't have to be cross legged with a candle lit and have beads. Sit down and breathe out. And when you breathe out, say one. And when you breathe in and when you breathe out, say one. I'm like, well, I can do this. That was my start to meditation back in about 2005, which then has led to many others. But that was the start of me regulating my nervous system, working on getting back in parasympathetic versus sympathetic and having the foot on the gas, and a very scientific, simplistic way of doing things, which was a good entry point to me. Now, since I could list probably over 10 deep meditation, deep dives, and various things I've done, um, so that was the start. Today, literally, I still meditate every day, most days twice, but at least once, every time I get up. And then I have my morning routine because it's crucial for me to set the stage in a healthy way and to give me time and space to connect inside at that quiet space of who I really am, which has the answers. And, Paul would say connecting to your soul and such. And so, nonetheless, the point is giving myself every day quiet time, reflection space, meditation, etc., to has been really helpful for me. And by the way, it's been a long journey and hard because I was so head up, like so caught in my head. That's what created all the so-called success in my life. But then I was completely disconnected from my body. And this has gradually over time helped me reconnect with the body animal, um, which has these answers, by just making that part of my daily practice.
I think the most important thing you brought up is you started where you are. Like most people don't want to do that. They'll start with, it's just like if we get back into the financial world, they can't balance their checkbook, but they want to know like the best, growth fund or whatever. It's like first, like balance your checkbook first, so you're not blowing money out of your ass every month, right?
Yep.
Um, and people can't sit silently for 5 minutes, but they want to try and do a 30-minute yoga nidra, right? As opposed to like, hey,
Yep.
let's just take a few breaths. Maybe let's just put the tongue in the roof of our mouth while we're driving in the car. Let's start with that. We don't need to do anything exotic or fancy. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I know we're coming to the end of your availability, and I thank you very much for being on here. What advice would you give to someone who's 40 plus year old male, who's not in a good place? Like maybe they've got some health challenges, maybe they're going through a rough time in a relationship or divorce. What do? You're 40, 50 years old, the wheels are coming off the wagon. What would be the one thing you would tell people in that situation to do?
Hmm. How and what they do is going to be up to them, Jim. So I'm going to try to create that much space. The guidance that I think that I would give that I hope is useful is um, connecting with themselves. And that can come from, this is why I said how and what they do could be different. Because some meditation, it may not work. But for some, it might be Tai Chi. Why? Because it's a moving meditation.
Right.
For some, it might be Qigong, or however you pronounce that. Uh, so some it could be a walk in nature.
Sure.
Some it could be meditation. I think the critical component to all of that is whatever you can do. And to your point, start slow. Mine was like 1 to 2 minutes, just sitting in a chair before dinner every night as I'm basically sprinting through the door from work because my hair's on fire, and then I'm gonna try to connect with the kids. And but I'm like, I can do freaking 2 minutes. So start where you are and do something to connect with yourself because in there lies all the answers. And then Jim has the answers of what do you do with your body, things to eat, being outside, getting some sun, all these things. Important for the audience, if I'm listening to it, which is speaking to me, is how do I best connect with me? And I think it's having silence time, however you can do that, and it'll expand and grow. And then I think in time, it can literally become part of your life. Like every day throughout the day, you don't have to be sitting in meditation, but you can be connecting to listening to your body. What do I want to eat? Like, what do I really want to eat versus what the book or thing says? Because your body knows, in relationship, we're good at projecting. Well, what am I really feeling here? And being able to be authentic and express our wants and needs as well as needs of others. So to me, that's the best piece of advice I can give. And then how you get there is going to be up to you, and what works best for you.
I think the main message you're presenting there is just be present. Just be present. Don't live in the past, don't live in the future, live in the present. And what I tell people all the time is once you accept the fact that life is going to be constantly a different challenge, you're not going to reach to a point where, you know, there's always going to be challenges, there's always going to be difficulties, and that's just the way life is. And enjoy the happiness that you experience along the way, but that's not a destination. And I think once you accept that, like I know we've talked about this a number of times, it makes life much more manageable because you're like, what's the next challenge? It's just here to make me a better person. I'm going to learn from it. And that's really, once you understand that about life, I think it makes life a lot easier.
Totally agree, Jim. Like if we equate this journey to the gym, to go working out, right? And you get someone that
Yep.
comes to you, you're not going to slap 1,000 pounds on their back for a squat, even though you might be able to do that, or at least one
Right.
point could do
Or
that.
would you even need to? And that's the thing. And that's the
Yes.
whole thing about learning to work with nature as opposed to trying and fight it.
Right.
And you just have to understand that one day nature's going to throw something at you that is going to get the best of you. And that's just kind of how it works. And is that day today? Hopefully not. Is it next week? Is it tomorrow? Maybe. And you just do the best you can every day and then be ready for when that time comes. And hopefully that's nice and graceful. But that's just kind of life, how it works. We're really not in control. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons humanity is struggling right now because we think we are God and we are not.
I get it. Yeah, we don't have near the control. One of my favorite teachers in this area, um, Michael Singer. I've read everything and every that he's put out via written material or video at least twice, and this guy's been doing
Mhm.
it a long time. And so, yeah, it really simplifies to me, yeah, the path we're on. And I guess if I were to attempt to synthesize his work is basically a part of what you're saying, Jim, and that is we don't have control really of anything. If you 99.9999% we don't. So if that's the case, which it is, then maybe we should just embrace what is, accept what is, and then we are here for a reason to grow. And can we make it better? How can I improve what is? But you can't change what is.
Right. Absolutely. Scott, thank you so much for being on today. Tell people where they can find you and learn more about you.
Yeah, the easiest place would be the way to wealth. THEWEWAY, the number two, and wealth, spelled out DWEALTH. So the way to wealth.com be the best, easiest way to learn more about me and what I'm up to. And yeah, man, good to see you and share and
Thank you so
more to
much.
come, as they say.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And it's great catching up with you. Have yourself a wonderful day. Please like, subscribe, share, and go check Scott's stuff out. Have a wonderful day, everyone.